Full frame is much better than a crop sensor camera, right? Well, you couldn't help but think like that because most of the filmmaking YouTubers out there use a full frame camera, and in the latest years we've seen a trend where more and more people use full frame, up to this point where you feel like crop sensor cameras aren't good enough. Are they? Well, let's look at prices. Narrow things down because there are a lot of cameras out there. I looked at the cheapest cameras available for content creators and filmmakers that want to do client work alike. And today's trend goes towards autofocus and cameras that can shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second 10-bit 422. I used B&H for the similar pricing grounds, but prices may vary. Here in Israel, for example, everything costs a whole lot more. We can see that the Sony a7 IV and the Canon R6 are priced similarly at $2,500. The Lumix S5 costs $2,000 and the GH6 costs $200 more than the S5, which is very interesting because the GH6 is a crop sensor camera. But if you want to go down a bit for the 4K 24 frames per second 10-bit 422 route, then you can get the GH5 for $1,600, or because it's a very old camera, you can buy it second-hand without any problem for much cheaper. Now, I know that the a7 IV has a crop sensor mode at 4K 60, the R6 has a smaller crop but can overheat, and the Lumix cameras never excelled at autofocus. But the point is that you can work around all of that, and we're talking about the best bang for your buck. So when I went into it, I thought I would see a quick win for the crop sensor cameras, but surprisingly enough, it's not there, and I think that in coming years the gap will probably be smaller. So if the prices are similar, then let's go for full frame because it's also better at low light, right? Thank you Camera Conspiracies for this video, and this is what annoys me mostly about crop sensor camera reviews. There's always a bad point there of low light, but no real proof. Come on, if you put it there, just prove it, because it's started to be just a fact in today's filmmaking YouTube world that if it's a crop sensor camera, then it will always have a bad point at low light, but it isn't always true and it depends on the lenses. Speaking of these lenses, I'm using the GH5, which has a micro 4/3 mount, which has been there for a long time, and being there for a long time, it adds a lot of lenses designed to it by different manufacturers. A lot of lenses means cheaper prices, and it's really much easier to find a lens for an MFT mount than other mounts out there. Also, crop sensors are smaller, so when you design a lens specifically for a crop sensor, it would have smaller glass elements. Smaller glass elements would mean a cheaper lens most of the time. So crop sensors are cheaper than full frame, but you can oftentimes find lenses that are priced the same, especially the premium level. So where does it leave us? Crop sensors and full frame in 2022 are basically identical, and you can be good with both of them. I think that the discussion today in the filmmaking niche in YouTube is a bit flawed, and it's not really full frame versus crop sensor. I think it's just good autofocus versus autofocus that isn't considered that good like the Lumix cameras. Because if you look at Canon and Sony, they don't have cameras that are crop sensor cameras that are not cinema line cameras that shoot at 4K 24 or 60 frames per second at 10-bit 422. And if they did have them, then I would think the discussion would be a whole lot different today. So don't feel bad if you don't have a full frame camera or if you have an MFT camera. It would do equally good. And now for the joke of the week. What would happen if Americans changed their measurement from pounds to kilograms tomorrow? You'll find the answer down in the comments below. You can leave a like for this video so more people will see it and won't be bummed out if they have a crop sensor camera. They're equally good as full frame cameras. In here you can see how you can do hybrid focus on your GH5 and trust that autofocus really good. Or you can check what YouTube recommends down here. I've been Tim, and I'll see you next week on the Elusive Frame with more filmmaking and creativity content. Goodbye.